How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Isaac Edelman here alongside Jeremiah Hensley, back here on FL Teams. Look, it's the off season, but you could always talk NFL football, and now's the perfect time because the Miami Dolphins released their schedule for the upcoming season. We knew who their opponents were going to be, but we didn't know in what order and what time, and if it would be on national TV. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Jeremiah, how's it going, man?
Good, buddy. Glad to be back. This is a fun time of year, right? We get the draft, and then we get the schedule release, and then we get into mini camps. It's that little ramp up, man. So I'm happy to be back talking football.
Exactly. So with that said, let's get right into it. The Dolphins are one of those teams that for the last few years, luckily, have been atop the NFL in terms of record, in terms of preseason rankings, whatnot. And it's because they have such a loaded roster. And it's the same thing this year, but the difference is the rest of the league has gotten that much better. And the Dolphins haven't really made that blockbuster move this offseason. And that's because they haven't had to. But when you look at the schedule, you might think otherwise. So with that said, Jeremiah, the Dolphins are going to start off the season with two home games. The first game against an FL team, a Florida team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then the second game is going to be a Thursday night game. So right away, the Dolphins are going to play the Buffalo Bills on national TV. And those are two teams that made the playoffs last year, two teams that are probably going to make the playoffs this year, and they're both in the AFC. What do you think about those first two games?
I mean, Jacksonville, I like, right? I mean, they're going to ramp up. That I think that's a good matchup. The Buffalo one, I don't know. I don't like that we only have 4 days. I don't like that it's Sunday and then you play Buffalo, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Buffalo and Miami are fighting for this division almost. I mean, for the last 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right at the cusp, and we're going to go into this on 4 days on a Thursday night. I don't like that. It's going to be weird to see how Buffalo is this year, though. I mean, we might be remembering last year's Bills.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you lose Stephon Diggs, you lose some other pieces. This might not be the same Bills team that was vying for the AFC Championship. I think it's a good start. After that it gets a little weird. We go West Coast, right? After the Thursday night game, now we're flying to Seattle.
Exactly. And that stretch is I think hard because first of all, Thursday night games, like you just mentioned, not a lot of time to prepare. And then now you're going over to Seattle, which is the furthest possible flight, right? From Florida to Seattle. That's totally diagonal across the country. And you're going to face an NFC team that, look, they're, I think, one of those teams that are on the edge of the playoffs. I feel like if you ask 10 people that know football really well how the Seahawks are going to end up, you're still going to get a lot of different answers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just a team that doesn't have necessarily the most flashy athletes, but they have enough skill to make the playoffs. But I want to still touch on this Buffalo Bills team. You mentioned that they lost Stephon Diggs. I just hate the fact that you're hosting Buffalo so early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
You have such good home field advantage when you get to host the Bills early. It's very hot. But then if you host them early, you know what that means? You get the tougher end of the stick. You have to face them in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
And that always haunts the Dolphins. Now, I know we're not necessarily going in order, but I'm just mentioning, luckily, the Dolphins don't play at Buffalo that late. I mean, November, it's still very cold, but it could have been worse if it was December or January. Just quickly touch on the fact that the Dolphins don't have to play the Bills near January.
Well, the odd thing here, though, is ever since Josh Allen made a big deal about how hot it was on the sidelines in Miami, it feels like it's been flipped, right?
Yeah.
Like last year, the Bills came, late and we went early, whatever. And now we get them at home, but it's on Thursday night.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's like it's an odd sort of thing to me that it's almost like since Josh Allen cried, he hasn't had to get in the sun in Miami. So we kind of lose that advantage on it. But I do like that we play them a little. We don't go late. The last couple of years, those last Dolphin Bill games have been kind of for the division. Mm-hmm. And it's been nail biting. And I don't, so I like getting that sort of out of the way earlier so we can focus on finishing out with something different. Because we've had trouble finishing. Let's be real. That's the Dolphin story. That's the McDaniel, MO.
And speaking of having trouble finishing, you remember that game against the Titans last year
Oh,
on national TV? Guess what? They play the Titans on national TV again Monday night on ESPN, week 4 at home against the Titans. You remember what happened last year? Will Levis, the Titans, come back. We were actually live for that game on FL Teams. Not saying there's going to be the same result, but it is on national television. What do you think about this game?
we owe them one, but now I'm literally I have like PTSD from that game with live streaming it last year. It went from so much fun to just awful. Like everything that could go wrong went wrong. To watch it, hopefully Miami's got that chip on them, and they're ready to go. Take it out. Now I will say it's kind of nice that we're getting a little bit longer, right? So we
Yeah.
play the Bills on the 12th. We fly out to Tennessee or to Seattle on the 22nd, so we get a little breather, and then we get 8 days before we got to go to Tennessee. Or Tennessee comes to us.
Exactly.
So at least there's some rest between the trip. But I think that's going to be interesting. I don't think we should live stream it.
Exactly. Hey, 2 national TV games in a span of 3 weeks. Here's the thing, though. Yes, Derrick Henry is no longer on the Titans, but you have to deal with a very good wide receiver room. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, just terrific wide receivers. You know how good Ridley is. You know how good Hopkins is. And then Tyler Boyd for a wide receiver 3, I think is phenomenal. He might be the best wide receiver 3 in the NFL. Well, the Dolphins do have Odell Beckham too. So that's going to be an interesting game in terms of offense. I think that's going to be a very high-scoring game. And what better to have a high-scoring game than on Monday night? Usually Monday Night Football has the high-scoring games. And that's why I'm surprised the Bills and Dolphins are playing on Thursday night.
Yeah.
Usually Thursday night has those low-scoring games where it's the 2 teams in the bottom of the league. Bills and Dolphins, 2 very good teams for a Thursday night game. But this is going to be a shootout, I think.
Yeah. So what I do like moving a little forward at that, and then right before the bye, it's at New England.
Yes.
Here's what I think Miami has going for it out of the gate. 3 of those teams have new head coaches, right? 5 of those teams have question marks on their offensive line. And our pass rush is not going to be where it needs to be at the beginning of the season. So, new teams, new coaches, new set. I think that bodes well for a good start for Miami, a hot start getting out, right? And you mentioned Travis Henry not being in Tennessee. Tajay Spears is the guy who killed us last year.
Yeah.
We couldn't do anything with that dude. So and New England's going to be really odd, right? This is the first time no Belichick.
Yes.
Right? And then, you've got the quarterback shuffle, and this is going to be.
But here's the thing, Jeremiah. Even though the Patriots, I don't think, will be a threat to the Dolphins, favoring the Patriots is the fact that this is a Week 6 game. And by then, I'd hope that they'd have some things figured out. Again, they'd still be an odd team. But if the Dolphins played the Patriots Week 1, I'd say it'd be a blowout. But being Week 6, I feel like they'd have a feel for, okay, is it Drake May or is it Jacoby Brissett? And they'd also have a feel for just a completely new play system. I mean, you still have Ramondre Stevenson, Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry. But again, like you said, Belichick's gone. It's a whole new system. But again, Week 6, they should have some things figured out. But that shouldn't scare the Dolphins for any reason.
And then speaking of that, like an early bye, I don't know how I feel about the early bye. We've had so many injury problems that have plagued us over the last couple of years. So getting that bye, after the New England game, there's a lot of football after that, man. There's a lot of football after that bye. And so I don't know how I feel about that one really. But we'll see. I kind of wish it was later.
I like the fact that we do have a road game after the bye. I love road games after a bye because why be home? You've been home all week. And this is going to be a pretty good game. It's not on national TV, but you're going to Indy to face Anthony Richardson and the Colts, who I think are going to be pretty good this year. Richardson should take a step up. Jonathan Taylor should be back to normal. Last year he had injury problems. Michael Pittman Jr., I think, is a really good wide receiver. We've seen that since his rookie season. But again, he's the type of wide receiver that's going to take a leap. He's not close to his prime yet. And then, of course, you can't mention the Colts without talking about their defense. Raekwon Davis, DeForest Buckner. This is a really good football team. And they're not that level of really good, but they're that level of, okay, they're at
Yeah.
home. They could beat the Dolphins.
They can beat anybody. I mean, they're a team that shooting up every week is going to have a chance. They're going to have a lot
Yep,
of close games this year.
exactly.
Um,
That's perfectly said. Perfectly
and
said.
then we move on. Check this out, Isaac. October 27th, week 8 is the second 1 o'clock kickoff in Miami. Week 8 before we have our second 1 o'clock kickoff in Miami. All of our home games are prime time,
Yeah.
right? Outside of Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
And so literally week 1 and week 8 will be 1 o'clock games for Miami. This is a weird feeling as a Dolphins fan, man. I'm used to having to find bars that are playing the Dolphins when I'm in Delaware. Like I got to find this small TV on the side. And all of a sudden we're getting all this publicity. I mean, it comes with the offense. I get it. But, Arizona's a big question mark. What are you really going to get? I mean, they tooled up the offense a little bit. But that's another one of those teams. Who knows what you get there?
Yeah, I mean, again, we're not here to make predictions, but the Cardinals are definitely not going to be as bad as last year. And
Yeah.
obviously, it's not necessarily a prediction to say the Dolphins are going to be the better team this year, but they do have to watch out. I mean, Kyler Murray is not as bad as people think he is. I mean, he's obviously trying to play football. I think that's a misconception that he's just given up. He's obviously trying to play football and
Right.
win games. You still have James Conner. Marvin Harrison, I think, is very good. Zay Jones was a good acquisition, but that's about it. I mean, the Cardinals are not going to shock you, and they're in a tough division, and it helps that the Dolphins are at home.
And West East, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they still got a flight, and that's kind of nice. So
And
you
again,
win
we're
the
not
home
making
game.
predictions, but here's the
Right.
thing you have to say. If it was last year's Cardinals, I'd say, okay, the Dolphins could beat them with a backup quarterback. But I don't think this year's Cardinals will be that bad. So again, what week is this? This is week 8. If Tua is injured, this is definitely not a give me.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna that's if you look at it in segments, right? You try to look at the season in quarters, right? And so we're coming up near halftime, pretty much around week 8,
Mm-hmm.
and this first half of the schedule is not too bad. I do like you said, we get to go to Buffalo in November. It'll be cold, but we're not going to get snowballs thrown at us. Right?
Exactly.
And then going the next West Coast trip takes us for a Monday nighter in LA against the Rams.
I like that. That's first of all Monday night, right? You have an extra day to travel
Yeah.
all the way out west, and it's in LA. I mean, what better than that? And it's against a Rams team that is going to give the Dolphins problems whether you like it or not. I mean, any national TV game on the road is hard to win. Look, Matthew Stafford, we know how good he is. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua is amazing. And then obviously, Cooper Kupp's amazing. That's going to be a hard game. And I think this is going to be a good test for the defense. As, it's still middle of the season, but as you start to get closer to the playoffs, around week 10 is when you start to get a good feel for how far your team's going to go. Obviously, injuries could plague your team. But around week 10, you kind of have a feel for, okay, are the Dolphins going to be a first-round exit? Could they be a Super Bowl favorite? Week 10, I feel like is a good feel for that, and it's against the Rams, so this should be a good game.
Week 11, I'm looking forward to. It's welcome home, Christian Wilkins.
Yeah, exactly.
We miss you. We miss you, big guy. But come on back. The Raiders coming into Miami for another 1 o'clock game, which is nice. And then you follow that up with New England at home. I like that. Okay, the Raiders improved, I guess, a little. New coach, the whole deal, right? No, not new coach. He was there last year. But then New England behind it. Another 1 o'clock. And then I think we hit the brutal spot, man. I mean, you tell me Thanksgiving in Lambeau at 8 o'clock.
It's going to be cold.
And it's going to be Lambeau. I mean, and on Thanksgiving, there's just something about – I mean, look, it's going to be amped up, right?
Yeah. Look, as bad as it sounds, as much of a threat as the game is, you can't shy away from the big game. And it's good to have the big game before the actual big game, which would be a playoff game. And again, it's not an AFC team. So in my eyes, I like it. It's going to be a thrilling game. It's going to tell us a lot about the Dolphins. And again, we're not going to face the Packers in the playoffs unless it's the Super Bowl, which is not going to happen. So in my eyes, yes, it's going to be tough to win, but I don't think it's good to have every game be not necessarily an easy win, but a favorable win. You can't
Sure.
always have a favorable win, and I think it's a good test that it's in the cold.
So the knock on the Dolphins last year that we all heard was you beat up on the bad teams, you can't beat the good teams.
Yeah.
You beat up on the bad, you can't beat the good. You can't close out. So with me, as much as I look at this closing stretch of the season and I understand how tough it is, I'm here for this
Yeah.
because I want to see what this team is. The rebuilding nonsense is out the window. It's done, right? We built this team to be able to make a run in the playoffs. And if we're going to do that, then bring it, man, because after Green Bay, really kind of weird that our first game against the Jets is like week 14 but what is it? I don't even know.
Week
but
14.
Week 14 is our first time that we play the Jets. That's just odd, right? At least it's at home. But then you hit that stretch. Well, the Jets, Isaac, you and I both on the Jets. It's a little different, right? I think they're going to take that next step because partially Aaron Rodgers will be healthy. We don't know what he'll be, or he may not be healthy by the time we play them. But I think the Jets will be better.
Yeah. I look at the Jets and I say, okay, yes, you're right, Jeremiah. They will be ready. Yes, Aaron Rodgers should be back, obviously barring another injury. But still, when you compare them to the Dolphins and Bills, they're going to have a hard time competing. And it's hard to say because we don't know, like you mentioned, how good Rodgers will be or how bad he will be. But it's not like they have any huge X factors. Don't get me wrong. Mike Williams is amazing. Brees Hall is not bad at all. But it's not to the level of the Bills, and it's not to the level as the Dolphins. That's my issue with this team.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, like we say, here's the test. This is it. As Dolphin fans, it's a sigh of relief, honestly, because I'll know who they are. Because your next 3 games at Houston, San Francisco at home, at Cleveland.
Yeah.
Are you a playoff? Are you a contender or are you not?
I want to touch on this Texans game. On the road, it's a 1:00 game on a Sunday, but you're going to get a good feel for how good this team is. The Texans are going to be, just like the Dolphins, a favorite to come out of the AFC as an AFC champion. And that's because of what they did last year. There were a lot of question marks heading into last year because it's such a young team and you have a young guy at the helm in CJ Stroud. But this year, they got so much better and they were already really good last year. You get Stephon Diggs, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. That helps the Dolphins. You get him out of the AFC.
That's true.
But you do have to face him in this game, week 15. And they don't just have Stephon Diggs. They have Tank Dell, who was really good. Nico Collins, who's really good. Really good. All these guys are insanely young, but they are really, really powerful. And like you said, this is going to be a great test. And again, you could face the Texans a few weeks later in the playoffs. So this should be
the Texans. Look, last year the Texans backfield was, I don't know, right? This year the Texans backfield is Joe Mixon. So all those wide receivers you just mentioned, CJ Stroud and Joe Mixon, that's an offense that's going to test you, man.
Yeah, and you still got Dameon Pierce, who in his rookie season was the running back.
Was fantastic, right?
Last year, and I love Devin Singletary because I'm a big FAU guy.
Yeah.
Dameon Pierce had his struggles, and Singletary, not that he had his struggles, he's just not that good.
He's not Mixon.
But this year, you got Joe Mixon, and you got Stephon Diggs, and there's no denying how good he is.
And then you come off that, and San Francisco comes to Miami. Like these are I look at these as playoff games. The playoffs for the Dolphins start with Houston. For me, if you're going to contend, this is where you show it. And I'm all right with that. I want to see it as a Dolphin because I'm so tired of expectations that I get let down as the season ends. I want to know who they are. Yeah. And we will.
And that's one of the good reasons of having such a strong schedule. You get to know who the Dolphins are. This is one of the NFC's best teams, the San Francisco 49ers. You can never stop them. It seems like the 49ers have those same pieces. George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. We know Brock Purdy's been in the league for a few years now. And then Christian McCaffrey, who's now been on the 49ers for a few years. this is a strong team, and they never have to make that many changes in the offseason because they are just that good of a team, and it's because of Kyle Shanahan. I know you love Kyle Shanahan. He's part of that coaching tree where Mike McDaniel's from. Look, the 49ers are always going to be a tough team to play.
Sure.
At least you get to host them at home. I don't think the 49ers have been in Miami in a while.
It's been a while, but look, and no other team knows Mike McDaniel better than the guys in San Francisco. I mean,
Yeah.
you could argue that the offense in Miami is just San Francisco AFC, right? I mean, it's the same basic concepts, which I'm interested to see if McDaniel switches up a little bit this year. But we get through that, and then we go to Cleveland on December 29th.
Yeah.
It's going to be cold. And the
Yeah.
Browns are good. They are. They're tough.
Yeah.
It's
Look, just like Buffalo, I think Chicago and Cleveland are up there, and of course Green Bay as the coldest stadiums to play in. You know the wind is a huge factor.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jason Sanders. We'll see how he plays in that game. But I want to talk about the 49ers game and the Browns game. This is where I'm going to look at the Dolphins' offensive line.
Oh, yeah.
These two teams have terrific defensive lines. This is where I look up at the Dolphins' offensive line. Do they hold up? This is where I see Tua's pocket presence. We say year after year that it keeps on improving, but it can't keep on improving enough to prepare you against these two teams. These two teams are incredible when it comes to their defensive line. So, again, I know I love highlighting the offense, but offensive line, can't always talk about Waddle and Tyreek Hill. This is a game for the offensive line to shine.
And that's what I feel good about this stretch. If the Dolphins make the playoffs, they will have seen playoff caliber teams in at least 4 of their last 6 games.
Yeah.
So you're not going in unprepared. You didn't play cupcakes, right?
And they'll be
didn't
prepared.
Get the Patriots.
And they'll be prepared for the weather thanks to Cleveland and Green Bay, because we saw what happened with the snowballs. That was their first experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
This year, they'll have the Browns and Green Bay under their belt. And even if it isn't snowing, it's going to be freezing cold.
It's going to be bad. And look, there's atmospheres in stadiums. I love football because teams can make a difference. One of those is like Seattle. I think Seattle and the 12th man really makes a difference, and we play there. Cleveland, when the Browns are good, the dog pound is off the hook, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, they get loud. It's a rough, hostile environment, and I like that because they may be fighting for a playoff spot too. I mean, that's what we're not talking about. At this point, you're fighting for playoff spots. Houston could be there. San Francisco could be there. Cleveland could be there, fighting for division titles, fighting for seeding. Yeah, and I mean, those are battles. And
unless
the Jets,
unless the Browns are playing like the Ravens, they usually win these cold, windy games late in the season, and it's because what happens in those games, they run the ball, and when you have Nick Chubb, they get the job done. Don't get me wrong, the Dolphins have a very deep running back room, right? They have a lot of depth with Raheem Mostert leading the charge. But here's the thing. They don't necessarily have that guy that's going to run for 150 yards in the cold like Nick Chubb would. So that's just the difference in my eyes.
We did draft a pretty big back. I mean, he runs a 4.3, but my guy's still big, right? Coming out of Tennessee. So the bigger question is going to be this, and we've asked it a million times, Isaac. Will McDaniel commit to the run? Will he stay with the run, right? Yes. Or is he going to go getting fancy again and everything go off track?
And this is such a rhetorical question because we can never answer it. Seems like sometimes he can't answer it because he doesn't know when and when not to commit to it. So that's the answer to your question. Let's wrap this up by talking about the final game of the season. I mean, these two teams are going to be fighting for a playoff spot. I'd assume by week 18, the Dolphins would have clinched the playoff spot. The Jets, maybe they haven't, and they're hosting it at MetLife Stadium. So this should be interesting. And again, this is a TBD. So it's one of those games where if you are fighting for a playoff spot, it could be moved to national TV. Mm-hmm. And it is in New York. So that will actually make it more likely to be national TV game because the Jets faithful will be out there no matter the weather. What do you think about this game?
It's interesting because it's going to be the second time in 5 weeks if they are good, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to be pretty familiar with each other. You're already familiar with each other from years of playing, but within 5 weeks, not a lot changes. So it'll be interesting to see the adjustments, right, of what's made, and it's going to fall down to where the teams are. I mean, we're not making predictions, but I do think that this game could be for the AFC East title.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
I could.
Because I'm just not, I don't know what's happening in Buffalo, but you heard me last year. I think that window's closing. We'll talk more about that later, but that's just my personal opinion. Pieces are leaving and they're not replacing them.
Yes. I mean, when you have a guy like Stephon Diggs leave, there's no such thing as replacing him unless you get like Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill. And that obviously is not going to happen. You still have Josh Allen, though, which is why I think the Bills are going to be good. And until he moves to a different team or he just gets old, which isn't going to happen for a while, the Bills are going to be good. Keon Coleman is not going to replace Stephon Diggs, but he is going to be good. And then you still got Curtis Samuel, and you got Chase Claypool. They even got Mac Hollins now. So I mean, they got a few former Dolphins. It's not going to be as good as having Diggs. That's
look,
for sure.
Chase Claypool and Mac Hollins are like the quintessential. Our wide receiver room is broken. Bring them in. That's how they came to Miami. Yeah. Then they went to Vegas. Then like they just kind of.
And by the way, they got Valdez-Scantling too. So they got a lot of these guys that, in terms of fantasy football, 1 week they're going to get 10 points, 1 week they're going to get 0, and there's no such thing as predicting it. Am I right?
Absolutely. Nobody knows. Yeah, but look, here's my question. Can Josh Allen manage that kind of offense the way that Mahomes does? Mahomes is perfectly fine spreading the ball to 8 guys. Yeah. Right? Can Josh Allen be that guy?
Yeah, that's a great question. He has the skill to do it, but it's going to be an adjustment, which is why you can't say it's a guaranteed yes. So with that said, those are the Dolphins, 17 games in 18 weeks. It's going to be an interesting season, as it has been ever since the Dolphins got Tua. And the good thing is the Dolphins have the weapons. I think that getting Odell Beckham made the Dolphins that much better. The defense should be interesting. You know, they're staying around the same level as they had been last year, but you lose Xavier Howard, but he wasn't that much of an X factor. Xavier Howard, no pun intended.
We upgraded. We upgraded at corner. And I think they made some crafty moves on the defensive line, and we'll see that in the first 4 weeks or so against some weaker offensive lines. But drafting, our kid from Penn State and having Shaq Barrett behind him, right, kind of rolling in that Melvin Ingram role from before, while Phillips and Chubb get healthy. I think there were better picks than it looks on paper for the Dolphins defense. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, with that said, Jeremiah, I appreciate you for coming on. It was fun talking Dolphins football for the first time in a while.
I know, man. I missed this. I told you I bought a new Dolphins shirt for it and everything, man. I'm pumped.
I know. We'll have to do more content, and not just for the Dolphins. Follow at FL Teams on social media and go to flteams.com for the latest and best news regarding all professional and college teams in the state of Florida. Just giving you some previews. We will be having some special college football and college basketball interviews with USF's coaches soon. And then, of course, we'll have content for all of the sports teams in the state. So just stay up to date. The Florida Panthers, well and alive, they are going to face the New York Rangers tomorrow in the Eastern Conference Finals. And we'll have content regarding the other teams, especially the Miami Marlins and Tampa Bay Rays. Jeremiah, thanks so much for watching. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.